man-eaters of Tsavo, two manless male lions, and for nearly 10 months none of the hundreds of workers building the Uganda Railway in Kenya managed to sleep through a single night. The attacks began in March 1898. A man would vanish during the night. By morning, only a torn tent showed where he had been. At first, the logic behind the attacks was hard to understand. One lion would enter from one side of the camp, while the other appeared on the opposite side, splitting the attention of any guard. While one created confusion, the other had already chosen its victim and was slipping away with him into the darkness. Over time, the two began entering together, each carrying off its own victim. The lions learned how to get around the thorn fences, and the campfires did not intimidate them. On one of the most terrifying nights of that period, one of the lions approached a train car where workers were sleeping. Through the cracks in the wood, 5 pairs of eyes watched the animal move in the dark. No one screamed, no one moved. The lion broke through the entrance, lunged at the workers, and left, carrying one man away, while the other 4 remained frozen, holding their breath, unable to do anything except listen as the screams faded into the darkness outside. The belief that they were demons in the form of lions spread through the camps. Hundreds of workers fled. The progress of the railway was severely disrupted. The engineer in charge of the construction, John Patterson, took on the hunt personally. He built a wooden platform in a tree, tied the carcass of a donkey directly below it as bait, and spent entire nights motionless in the dark, rifle ready, listening closely to every sound of the surrounding savannah. The lions never appeared when he was on watch. Patterson moved the ambush to a freight car, then to the camp hospital. He failed every time. Week after week, the attacks continued. In December, after months had passed, one of the lions finally came within range. Patterson spotted the shadow approaching, steadied his breathing, and fired. The lion retreated into the brush, wounded, but returned that same night. Patterson was waiting. He fired again, this time shooting straight through the animal. The first one had fallen. The second resisted shot after shot over the course of several days. Patterson would hit it, watch it retreat, and then find it back in the camp the following night. It took multiple shots with different weapons over more than a week before the final one brought it down for good. The company recorded 28 deaths. Patterson claimed 135. Modern analysis of the preserved bones at the Field Museum in Chicago estimated that around 35 humans were eaten, and revealed that at least one of the lions had broken teeth that made hunting natural prey painful. The railway had concentrated hundreds of people inside their territory, and the lions learned exactly what that meant. Kesagake, the Sankabetsu bear. In December 1915 in Hokkaido, Japan, a brown bear weighing more than 750 pounds came down from the mountains to the farming settlement of Sankabetsu. It had appeared in the fields before, destroying corn. The settlers drove it off with warning shots fired into the air. It retreated for a few days. The settlers felt at ease. They should not have. On December 9th, Kesagake returned. This time it did not come through the fields. It broke into the Oda family's house while the father was away. A child and a pregnant woman were taken into the forest and disappeared. When the neighbors arrived to help, the bear was still roaming nearby. It returned. The house next door was also attacked. By the end of that single day, 7 people had met the same fate. It was the worst bear attack ever recorded in Japanese history, and it had happened within a matter of hours, from house to house. When the hunters went after Kesagake that same night carrying lanterns and rifles, it did not run. It chased them back through the snow. It used the terrain and the darkness to disappear among the trees and reappear from different angles, always keeping the men on the defensive. The most experienced hunters in Hokkaido retreated without being able to get close to it. In the days that followed, a force of more than 60 people was mobilized. Veteran hunters, armed settlers, men who had known that forest for decades. For 5 days, Kesagake continued to maneuver around them, shifting position before they could surround the area, appearing where it was not expected. The snow recorded its tracks, but the bear always changed direction before the trap could close. On the 5th day, the hunters found it on a snow-covered slope. This time, there was no way out to the side. Kesagake realized the circle was closing and charged. The men on the front line fired almost at the same time. The bear was hit, stumbled, got back up, and took more shots before finally collapsing into the snow. When they approached, the silence that settled over that hillside was the first peaceful silence Sankabetsu had known in 5 days. When they examined it, they found a completely healthy animal with no injuries, nothing that could clinically explain what had happened. The most accepted theory involves pre-hibernation hyperphagia, a state in which the bear seeks calories with extreme urgency. First came the crops, then the repeated contact, and then the attack. Once Kesagake discovered that humans were accessible prey, no instinct held it back. The man-eater of Panar, a male leopard in the Panar region in the Almora district of India, was credited with around 400 deaths in the early 20th century. The area was too remote for certainty. What turns an animal into legend is not always the number of victims. Sometimes it is the method. And this leopard's method was what terrified people most. It did not wait for them outside. It went in. On hot nights, homes in the region were left with open windows, thatched roofs, and doors built to allow ventilation. Every gap was a possible entry point. The leopard learned that it would climb onto porches in silence, leap through windows without making enough noise to wake those inside before it was too late to react. On one of the nights described in the records of the time, a man was pulled from sleep by the sound of something heavy on the porch. Before he could get up, the leopard was already inside the room and had his wife by the neck. He threw himself onto the animal in the dark, without a weapon, without light, with nothing but his bare hands. The two rolled across the floor as he tried to free the woman's throat from the leopard's bite. When he finally managed it, the animal backed out onto the porch. Then it began. Throughout the night, it hurled its body against the door again and again, the wood groaning with every impact, while the couple, pressed against the wall on the other side, held the door shut with the weight of their own bodies. They could not call for help. They could do nothing but endure and hope the wood would hold until sunrise. When the sun finally came up, the leopard was gone, but the terror did not end there. Jim Corbett, the same hunter who had solved other seemingly impossible cases, was called in to deal with the leopard of Panar. The first expedition in April 1910 produced no result. The animal was nocturnal, silent, and the region was too dense for effective tracking. Between that attempt and the second in September, Corbett would later admit that he did not know how many had met the same fate in the meantime. There were no bulletins. While he was away, the leopard kept going. On the second expedition, Corbett tied a goat as bait in a clearing and climbed into a nearby tree, bracing himself with thorn branches to stay steady for hours in the dark. At night, the forest of Panar was filled with constant sound, and picking out the right one among them demanded an almost physical concentration after hours of remaining still. Then the birds went silent. The goat stopped moving. From the dark line of the forest, a low, silent shape began moving toward the clearing. When the leopard came close enough, Corbett fired. The shot hit, but did not bring the animal down. Instead of fleeing, the leopard turned toward the villagers, watching from a distance, and for a moment everything threatened to spiral out of control. That was where Corbett made the difference. He climbed down from the tree, kept his nerve in the dark, and before the leopard could vanish back into the forest, he found its outline and fired a second time. The final shot ended years of terror in Panar. The Champawat Tigress. No predator in recorded history claimed more human lives than she did. A Bengal tigress spent 3 years in Nepal, leaving behind a trail of 200 deaths. Hunters were sent after her and failed. The army was mobilized and managed only to drive her across the border into India. She crossed into the Kumaon region and continued for another 4 years, this time attacking in broad daylight. There was no safe hour, no safe place, and the simple act of leaving home had become a decision people weighed carefully. Rewards were offered. Famous hunters accepted the challenge one after another. None of them managed to bring her down. The total attributed to her reached 436 victims, the highest number ever credited to a single predator. Then a 31-year-old hunter took on the mission without accepting the reward money. He arrived in Champawat and found a town that had forgotten what it was like to live without fear. Doors shut during the day, fields abandoned. Villagers reporting that the tigress had been heard roaring in the nearby forest for days. He went to the site of the last attack and found little more than a few bones on the ground. While examining the trail, word arrived of a new attack in a neighboring village. He set out on foot immediately. When he got there, he learned of an even more recent attack elsewhere. The tigress was on the move, and he was always arriving too late. He followed the blood trail through the vegetation and managed only a brief glimpse of her in the distance before the light faded. The next morning, he changed his approach. Instead of chasing her, he needed her to come into a space where he had the advantage. He instructed the villagers to form a line and move forward, making as much noise as possible, shouting and banging on pots, driving the tigress toward the open edge of the forest. Meanwhile, he ran along the other side through dense vegetation, slipping on rocks and roots, trying to reach the clearing and get into position before the animal emerged from the trees. When he reached the edge of the forest, he stopped, breathed, waited. The tigress came out of the trees in the direction he had expected. He fired and hit her in the hind leg. She did not fall. She began climbing over a rock, trying to put distance between them. He fired again and missed. With her already on the far side of the rock and out of sight, there was no choice but to climb up after her. When he reached the top and looked over the other side, the tigress was already on another rock above him, charging straight at him and closing the distance in seconds. The third shot brought her down in mid-charge. She fell just yards away from him in the grass. When he examined the body, he discovered that the canines on the right side were completely broken. It was an old injury from a previous gunshot in Nepal that had left her unable to kill her natural prey. For years, humans had become the prey she could still bring down. It was not cruelty. It was a wound that had never healed, and none of the hunters sent before had gotten close enough to discover it. The hunter carried the body from village to village around Champawat. Women who had lost children, and an entire generation raised in fear, needed to see it with their own eyes. For the terror to truly end, the shot was not enough. Proof was needed. That 31-year-old hunter was Jim Corbett.